Well, welcome everybody. This is Biology 106, and I am looking forward to the summer semester with you. I am Dr. Macauley, and I am looking forward to continuing this journey in the second half of this anatomy and physiology sequence here at MCC. We're going to be starting with chapter 24 in this course, and the reason we're starting at the end is in Biology 105, we've already gone through all of the systems. We already have a good appreciation of the overall balance of the body and the homeostasis and the overall body systems. And as we start this semester, we're going to be beginning with basically water balance and where water is found in the body. And then we'll be moving on to compartments and electrolytes. And this will be a very important conversation as we begin to discuss the nervous system and action potentials and the importance of electrolytes in controlling homeostasis. Let's first, though, go back over to the syllabus, and let's just go over a few main ideas here. So within the syllabus, you're going to see that this is the second half of the course, of the sequence. My office is upstairs. I think most of you are familiar with this, but my office is upstairs in room 243C. It's the corner office. But to be very honest, in the summer, I'm really not camping out in my office very much because I am either in lab or in lecture. You can always find me in the anatomy lab area in the afternoons and in the evenings, and from 4 to 6 every day I'm lecturing either with you folks or on Mondays and Wednesdays with Biology 105. So I'm not going to be very hard to find. If you ever need to find me, just find me in the labs. Just knock on the door, come in, ask me a question. I'll be able to entertain your questions at that time. The best way to reach me is definitely by email. Sean.macauley@muskegoncc.edu. I do check my email often, and I try to respond to every email as quickly as possible, and definitely that is a way to reach me this summer. I can let you read through the goals and the other expectations of the course. What you need for the course, you pretty much already have from your Biology 105 days. The Saladin textbook, the Connect code. Your Connect code is valid for 24 months. And so as long as you've taken Biology 105 in the last 2 years, that code should be valid. Simply go to the URL that is listed here and follow the instructions, and then you will be able to register using your old username and password. In there you'll also find, of course, the APR program and the PHILs programs. PHIL is new for you, but we'll be using PHILs this week in lab. So please make sure you are registered in Connect as soon as possible. If for some reason you do not have your code, it has expired, or maybe you took Biology 105 at a different institution and it transferred in, and you need to purchase that Connect code, you may do so at the bookstore, or you may do so when you register. It'll give you the option of paying for it with your credit card. Now, if you're not able to do that immediately, there is a free 3-week trial that you can register for, so you can get started, and then when you do purchase your card, it'll roll over seamlessly and you won't lose any of your information. So there's no excuse. There's no reason not to be enrolled in Connect by the end of the day. You're also going to need Biology 106 lecture supplement, where you'll find all the PowerPoint notes. For lab, you'll need the lab supplement. So really all you need to purchase are those 2 supplements from the bookstore. And I assure you that whatever price you pay is a lot cheaper than ink cartridges to print out all of these PowerPoints to follow along. You will need 6 of the Scantron 884-E forms. These are a little bit different than many people use on the campus, so make sure you're getting the correct form. This is an 8.5 by 11 full-sized green double-sided form. For lab, you will need some gloves. Later in the course, you will need some safety glasses for the urine lab, and as always, you want good access to internet. not only for watching PowerPoints, but also viewing the lectures, doing your Connect assignments, etc. You want to have a backup plan as well. So should your computer internet connectivity go down at home, you want to know, where can I go at 2 in the morning or 7 in the morning or whatever time to get internet access? Maybe it's the local McDonald's or the local Starbucks. If your computer gets a virus or crashes, you want to have a backup plan. Who else can I go to at a strange hour to borrow a laptop or a computer? So make sure you have those backup plans in place. There really is no excuse not to have a backup plan when you have deadlines for computer-based assessments. As far as your grade goes, you will be getting your grade based upon 1,000 points in the class, and here's that list of activities that you'll be getting your grade from. So there are 5 lecture exams. Each of those lecture exams is worth 100 points. That's 500 points. There'll be 14 lecture quizzes. Those 14 lecture quizzes will be on Connect. They will be due shortly before the exams. There will be 14 of them. However, only 10 of them will count toward your grade. So if you miss a couple or do poorly on a couple, then you know that at the end of the semester, those 4 lowest grades will be dropped. So you're only going to be getting credit for the top 10 lecture quizzes. There will be 2 case studies throughout the semester. These are normally done with your lab group. So we can talk about that later on as we get closer. There will be the assignments on Connect. At the end of the semester, if you have done all of the assignments and you have gotten no less than 80% on all of them, then you will get all 30 points. If you have missed a significant number of assignments or you did poorly on quite a few of them, you will not get all 30 points. So make sure that as you're doing the Connect homework assignments that you're striving for at least 80% on every one of them. Not only will that assure your full 30 points at the end of the semester, but it will also assure that you are as prepared as possible for the exams. There will be 4 Anatomy and Physiology Revealed assignments. These are also linked off from Connect. They will help you prepare for each of the 4 lab exams. There will be a lab report due related to muscle physiology. Again, that'll be a group activity. And finally, nearly every week there will be a quiz in the lab, and those are each worth 10 points. A few details down below, but I think if you look over that, let me know if you have any questions. Please, if you have any conflicts, let me know as quickly as possible. In the summer, there are very few options for making things up, so it's very important that you look ahead and let me know of any conflicts. I'll go over lab-specific things when we get to the lab, but here's the grading scale. And when we get to lab, I'll just remind you of how important the attendance is in lab, and that in Biology 106, because there are group activities in the labs, far more than in 105, it's really important that you make your lab time a priority. If you have to make up a lab, I understand that in the rare moment, but it cannot be a regular occurrence because you have teammates now who are depending on you for doing some work toward these group lab reports and the case studies. So it's very, very important that you attend your regularly scheduled lab. The rest of the syllabus I will let you read through. It's very standard language. I will say this about the exams. They will be taken as scheduled on the assignment, on the calendar. You will need a Scantron form. I will prepare you for those and tell you more about them right before we have them. The policy I have is that if you miss an exam, all makeup exams are taken at the end of the semester after the final exam. So please make sure you are at the exam as scheduled. There are some exceptions to my rule, and those are usually school-related activities that are planned well in advance. Those students who are in the hybrid section, You are always welcome to attend the lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 o'clock. If you're not able to attend, make sure that you are committing to listening to these lectures. And for the exams, you can take the exam the same day in the testing center. Now, on Thursday night, I'll be meeting with all of you in the hybrid section at the lab, and we'll talk about other possibilities as far as taking the exams. We want to see you be really successful here at Muskegon Community College, and as such, we've set up quite a few resources for you. There is a biology resource room that is in room 249. It's right next to the lab, and this is the room where you can study as a group or as an individual. We've got microscopes, models, books, overhead projector, computers, a whiteboard, all sorts of things for you to interact with the equipment and the materials. This is also where Janae, our walk-in tutor, is meeting. Those hours were already posted for you, but she's sitting there on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at the assigned times, waiting for you to come by and ask her questions. She did have me for these classes, so she understands the way that I do my classes, and she's a fantastic resource. In addition to that, if you feel like you need some additional one-on-one tutoring, you may stop by room 204 in the tutoring center and arrange for a tutor. The rest of the syllabus is very standard language. It just reminds you that we are an accredited program, that you should check your MCC email often, as well as check your Blackboard announcements often. That is the way by which I'll communicate with you, especially if you are in hybrid. It is absolutely critical that you're checking your email every day since you're not coming to class. Student behavior, I expect that you will behave appropriately, that we will respect each other, and there won't be any problems with that. Academic integrity, I feel very strongly that students who cheat should not pass the course, so make sure that you are not putting yourself in any jeopardy. If you have any questions about plagiarism, also please check in with me. Again, check your Blackboard often, and you can read through a few things about lecture. While I don't require attendance at lecture and I don't take attendance for points, I do know that there's a very strong correlation between those who attend class and those who do well in the course. So I ask you to please make it a high priority that you attend lecture. I know that these lectures are available to you on YouTube. However, that really should be a backup plan. If you're in the hybrid section, make sure again that you are listening to these things and that you're not getting behind. If you do have any sort of disability that has been in the past documented, a learning disability, a visual or hearing issue, PTSD, something like that, and you think that there could be some accommodations made for you in your testing, please contact the Special Services Office in room 101. They are there to help you and to let me know in confidence what special needs you have. But if you have taken advantage of that office in the past or think you might, you must reestablish that relationship every semester. So stop by, talk with them, and we'll take care of what needs to be done for you. Let's take a look at this. Turn to your neighbors and go ahead and gather some student names and telephone and email numbers, email addresses. That way you can contact somebody else if you have a emergency or need to gain some more information, or maybe to establish a study group. Okay, moving on, the course calendar. Let's take a look at this. This is both for lecture and for lab. Here we are, Tuesday, May 13th. The first column is everything to do with the lecture and in the Saladin textbook. So you can see that today we're dealing with water balance. So we'll be talking about water balance and fluid compartmentalization today, and we might get just to a little bit about neurons and the nervous system. These pages are basically a starting point in the book, where to go to get started with the information. Those are not exclusive page numbers. And then finally, everything to do with lab is over here on the far side, and you'll see that this week this week we're doing both labs 1 and 2 during the first week. Lab 1 will be a histology review, and Lab 2 will be over the nervous system. As you follow down through the calendar, you'll see that after the first couple of weeks, there's pretty much something going on every single day, or every single week, I should say. So you'll find that there's something going on every single week related to an exam or a quiz. Do put these dates on your calendar and let me know. But you'll see something bolded as you go down pretty much on both sides of the columns each week. July 31st will be our last day together. And so you can look forward to August and the beautiful beaches of Michigan in August for your well-earned vacation. But until then, please keep in mind that it will take some significant studying time on your part. You can go to the beach and study there, but you're going to have to spend some quality time looking over the material for Biology 106. Okay, if you have any questions about the syllabus, please do not hesitate to contact me via email. Let's get back now to our presentation and get started with this. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. For those who don't know me, I went to the University of Florida as an undergraduate student. I received my bachelor's and master's degrees in microbiology and cell science. I've always really enjoyed cell science and the intricacies of the cell. I was doing some research in alternative energy sources at the time of my master's degree, and then decided to earn my PhD at the College of Medicine in medical sciences. So I'm broadly trained in biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics, developmental biology, and did some research on wound healing and on developmental biology. My first faculty position was at Washington State University in Spokane. I was part of the Health Research and Education Center and the Department of Genetics and Cell Biology. Then we found ourselves at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, there for about 6 years. And then a couple of years in Oklahoma, where I was at Oklahoma Wesleyan University. And finally, the last 7 years, we've been in Michigan. I spent 1 year at Ferris State and now have been at Muskegon for 6 years. My wife also received her PhD in speech pathology and neuropsychology at the time that I was receiving mine. And we ended up in Grand Rapids. My wife was called up to Calvin to help them with their master's program, to implement their master's program in speech pathology. And about 3 years ago, she was hired by GVSU to also help them in their program development. And she's now the coordinator, the graduate coordinator of the speech pathology program. Perhaps some of you are thinking about speech pathology. It's a great major, and it seems every year I send her a couple of students. We have 5 great kids, one in kindergarten, one in 6th grade, one in 10th, one who's finishing her associates here at MCC and going to GVSU next year, and one who is finishing her nursing program here this summer at MCC and is then also going to GVSU for her BSN. So I understand busy schedules. I understand balancing many activities. I commute in every day from Grand Rapids. So much of the busyness that you have in your life, I share with you. And my job really is to teach you the anatomy and physiology that you need to be successful in your future careers. Okay, so let's get into the material here and start thinking about physiology. You know that every cell in your body, all of the trillions of cells in your body must get oxygen and nutrients and be exposed to hormones and get rid of their waste products. And you appreciate that there's always a constant movement of things into and out of the cells. Well, a large part of that movement of molecules in and out is also related to water balance and to the movement of electrolytes like sodium and potassium. So we're going to see how important it is that we appreciate where the fluid compartments are in our body. And we're going to see that there are a number of body systems that are working to maintain these homeostatic balances. So today we'll talk about water, and we'll talk a little bit about electrolyte balance today. We'll continue that electrolyte balance as we move through the next couple of chapters. And then the very Well, the second to last lecture that we'll have in this course will also be back to chapter 24. After the urinary system, we will discuss acid and base balance, also from chapter 24. So we're going to be coming full circle with this chapter. Now, there are a number of body systems that are working together to maintain these fluid levels and these balances. And this is going to be, of course, the urinary system as we think about fluid balance, but also the respiratory system. When we blow off air, we're blowing off moisture and water, but we're also blowing off CO2 and acid. The digestive system is getting rid of waste products. The integumentary system, we're sweating, and we're also transpiring water out of our body. The endocrine system and the nervous system are regulating much of these processes. The cardiovascular system, of course, is pumping the blood and working at the capillary levels to interchange with the lymphatic system. So there's a lot going on to maintain these fluid compartments. Now, a newborn baby is about 75% water by weight, and that makes sense. We know that the fetus, is being bounced around quite a bit, and so it makes sense that the baby's going to have a lot of water and be, if you will, a little bit more squishy. That's the way I think about it. Now, by the time we get to adulthood, the average male has about 55 to 60% water. Now, keep in mind that in physiology, the quote normal numbers have been established years ago using the idealized 25-year-old male who's 70 kilos. So we're talking about a 25-year-old male who's 150 pounds. That is the standard that many of the numbers you're going to read about in physiology. That's the standard. Now, we've modified that now for different ages and male and female, but many of the numbers you're going to come across were idealized on that 25-year-old, 70-kilo male. Now, women have a little bit less water than men, and if you're obese or older, you'll have even less water. But this water that you have within your body is called the TBW, the total body water, and in that 150-pound male, that's going to equate to about 40 liters of water. I'm not going to ask you how much that would weigh, but you can appreciate that's a substantial amount of the body weight. Now, where do we find these fluid compartments within the body? 65% of the fluid is intracellular. Now think about that word. That means that it's inside the cells, right? So 2/3, 65% of the water is intracellular. And about 35% is extracellular, okay, outside of the cells. Well, where is that fluid found in the body? Well, 25% of that extracellular fluid, I shouldn't say that, of that 35%, right, 25% is from the interstitial fluid. Remember, that's the fluid between the cells. 8% of your 35 is coming from both plasma and the lymphatic fluid. Don't be confused by that. That lymphatic fluid is referring to the fluid actually in the lymphatic vessels. And then the 2%, the last 2%, are just a catch-all of every place else where there's a little bit of fluid. This would be your CSF, your synovial fluid in your joint spaces, your serous membranes, the aqueous and vitreous humors of the eye, bile, you name it. This is the last little bit of water found in multiple compartments throughout the body. Now, this fluid, this water, is constantly exchanging between these compartments. And you recall from Biology 105, Lab 2, that the water is moving by the process of osmosis. Recall that osmosis is a passive process. It does not require ATP. And water moves from one compartment to the other, moves across the plasma membrane through what's called osmotic gradients. Now, osmotic gradients are basically a pressure gradient that's allowing the water to move. And you'll recall from also Lab 2 that solutes suck. That is, water is moving toward where there's a greater concentration of solutes. Those solutes could be proteins, sugars, salts, but something is drawing the water there. And so these changes are not very long lasting because water can so easily move from one place to another. If there is an imbalance, water quickly moves and restores that balance very, very quickly. Okay. Now, as water is moving, as I just mentioned, what is it that's drawing the water? And those are the solutes, all those other molecules. Now, by far, when we think about solutes, the most abundant of the solutes are the electrolytes, things like sodium and potassium and calcium and chlorine, the chloride ion. And what you need to remember right now and for quite a while is that in the extracellular fluid, by far the most abundant electrolyte is sodium and its associated salts. So sodium, sodium, sodium found outside the cell, whereas potassium is by far the most abundant inside the cell. And we're going to see how critically important it is that sodium stay outside the cell and that potassium stay inside the cell as we move forward. And we're going to see also just how critical these electrolytes are in moving and distributing this water from one compartment to another. So we can see in this image that water, coming into the body, comes into the digestive system, but then it is brought into the bloodstream as well, so that is going to help with your blood pressure, but that your blood vessels are also in constant exchange with your tissues. And so you've got fluid moving in and out of your tissues. That's that the tissue fluid, the lymphatic fluids. And that lymphatic fluid is being picked up by your lymphatic vessels, and your lymphatic vessels do in fact drain back into your bloodstream. So there's this constant movement of fluid from one compartment to another. Now we take fluid in every day and we lose fluid every day. This is referred to as just fluid balance. And the numbers again I'm using here are going to be your average male sitting at rest, not doing anything excessively as far as exercise or being tremendously dehydrated, but just going about normal physiology. So we're talking about 2,500 mils or so per day, 2.5 liters. Now, where is this water going to come from? Well, two sources for gains: the preformed water and the metabolic water. Preformed water is just as it says. It's water coming into your body already as water. Now, most of this is going to come from the drinks that you have. Your water, your pop, whatever it is that you're drinking, about 1,600 mils a day. And the rest will come from your food. Your fruits, your vegetables have water in them as well. So that's 2,300 of the 2,500 mils. The other 200 mils is metabolic water. Look at this equation on the bottom. Right? You recognize this equation. C6H12O6 plus 6 oxygens yields 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters. That is the overall equation, as you know, of cellular respiration. And what happens is that when you are consuming something, when you're taking in sugar and you're breathing oxygen, you are forming water. And so that's that metabolic water. So we're getting about 200 mils of water every day from our metabolism through this reaction. Now that's how we get water. How do we lose water? Well, there's sensible and insensible water loss. These are sort of a strange word, I think. Sensible water loss is water loss that is observable. What leaves your body every day that you can actually see and measure? Well, a large part of that is going to be your urine. So on average, 1,500 mils per day of urine, 200 mils per day of moisture and water in your feces, and about 100 mils a day from sweat. Now this is just sitting there resting, the amount of sweat that leaves your body. Now, insensible water loss is water loss that you cannot necessarily see. It goes unnoticed. As you breathe out, you're losing about 300 mils of water every day. just from your expired breath. You know that you can fog up a mirror because there's moisture in your breath. There's about 400 mils a day of cutaneous transpiration. This is not sweat per se that would beat up on the surface of your skin, but this is literally almost evaporation coming through your epidermis. And so there's your 2,500 mils of water that you lose on a daily basis. So there's this balance, right? 2,500 in, 2,500 out. It's important that you know these numbers. Now there is also what's referred to as the obligatory water loss. There is an unavoidable loss of of water. No matter how dehydrated you are still going to have moisture in your air. You're still going to have some of this transpiration, evaporation process occurring, and there would still be some feces and some urine output. It can be quite low if you're highly dehydrated, but there will always be an obligatory water loss. And you know why. We have got to get rid of the acids in our body, right? The kidneys are constantly filtering. And if we are not adequately getting rid of those metabolic acids, then what happens to our blood pH? Absolutely. So if we accumulate too many of these metabolic acids, then our blood pH will begin to drop. We become acidotic, and that has a whole sequela of consequences and that we'll be discussing more as we go through the course. So there has to be a certain amount of fluid lost every day. So here is what I've said in picture form. So we have the intake, about 2,500 mils every day. Where does it come from? Metabolic water, your food, and your drink. And then every day we're losing water through our urine, sweat, transpiration, expired air, and feces. Okay, so these are equal to each other, input and output. Now, how does the body assure that it's going to be getting enough water in and losing enough water? Well, you can imagine the nervous system and the endocrine system are going to be at play here in regulating and assuring that you're drinking and that you are excreting the wastes. So thirst, we've all been thirsty. And so when your body does not have sufficient water, the brain will send off a signal that says, hey dummy, go drink. It makes you thirsty. So when you're dehydrated, what happens? Well, as you're dehydrated, not enough fluid in your body, your blood volume will be reduced. And if your blood volume is reduced, so too will be your blood pressure. Now, as you lose fluid from your blood osmolarity is going to go up. Now, what's that mean? Osmolarity, the way I think of osmolarity, is how much stuff there is in your blood, how concentrated your blood would be. So as you're losing blood volume, you're not losing blood proteins. And so the osmolarity is increasing. Well, it turns out that your hypothalamus is concerned about this and is measuring the osmolarity of your blood. And in the hypothalamus there are osmoreceptors. So these are receptors that are measuring the osmolarity of your blood. And they're checking, right? So as you become dehydrated, your hypothalamus through the osmoreceptors triggers a thirst response. And what will happen is that as your blood pressure goes down, your kidney will make renin. Okay? And as your blood volume goes down, your osmolarity will rise. Now, those osmoreceptors will communicate with your cerebral cortex. Now, recall when you hear the word cerebral cortex, I want you thinking, oh, that's the conscious part of my brain. That's the part of the brain that is going to process and take action upon something. Recall that the brainstem is taking care of all those involuntary autonomic type responses. But when the cerebral cortex is made aware of something, it's because some sort of action must be taken. And so when the hypothalamus tells the cerebral cortex, hey, you're thirsty, then it drives you to go to the water fountain. Now, how does this work? Well, the hypothalamus, when it senses this imbalance, is going to produce antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone, ADH. Right? And ADH is all about promoting water conservation. Think about it. Antidiuresis. What does that mean? It means that it's a hormone that's going to act on your kidneys and tell your kidneys to not urinate as much. And the cerebral cortex, again, is going to give you that sense of thirst. Now, that sense of thirst really doesn't kick in. An intense sense of thirst will kick in with about a 2 to 3% increase in the osmolarity or in a 10 to 15% blood loss. So you're dehydrated, you've lost 2 to 3%, or you've increased, I should say, 2 to 3% in your blood osmolarity. That's going to drive you to the water fountain, or blood loss. Well, when you go to the blood bank and you give blood, you've only got about 5.25, 5.5 liters of blood, and they're going to take quite a volume of your blood, and you're going to be thirsty. So after a blood donation, they're going to give you some fluids, and they're going to tell you to continue to drink because you're just naturally going to be thirsty having lost that much blood. Also, ADH is going to inhibit your salivation. We know that when we're thirsty, our mouth is dry. That's not surprising to us. So you also recall that salivation, when you are in a sympathetic, right? Sympathetic signals would cause your mouth to be dry, wouldn't it? Like you're scared, you're fearful. That's when your mouth goes dry. So this whole hypothalamus and ADH and the cerebral cortex responses, you're also going to stop making saliva. What a waste that would be, right? If you're dehydrated, you certainly don't want to waste your time making saliva. Now, how can we regulate our sense of thirst? There's really two ways to regulate thirst. There's a long-term inhibition of thirst and a short-term inhibition. In the long term, you just want to drink water and let that water be absorbed from the intestines into the blood and restore or reduce the osmolarity of the blood. But this takes time. I mean, it takes time for you to drink and for that fluid to move and get into the bloodstream and to make a change. 30 minutes or longer to take an effect. But this is the long-term approach, right? Just drink. What can you do, however, in the short term? Well, in the short term, you can simply just put a little bit of water in your mouth. Right? If you've ever really been thirsty, you know just a few drops in your mouth will help quench your thirst. Now, it's just a short-term effect, right? That's not going to change the osmolarity of your blood, but it is in the short term going to help you not be as thirsty. The other thing that happens is that in the short term, there can be distension of the stomach and the small intestine. Okay? So these are short-term issues. And the other thing about this distension in the stomach is that you're really, really thirsty and you would not want to overdrink. Right? So even when you are just, oh man, I am so thirsty, you realize that there's a limit to that. You just can't continue to drink and drink and drink, because if you did, that's not good either. There's a balancing act here that we have to consider. And the distension of the stomach and the intestine actually helps you from over drinking in those times of thirst. So just follow this little chart. In physiology, you're going to have to be able to think through a series of events, cause and effect. So something goes up, and now something goes down. And if that goes down, then something else goes up. And it's going to be really important that you not only know the little pieces of the puzzle, but you can also tell the overall story. So I've given you some of these pieces. Now let's put them into one big story on this image. So taking a look, you're dehydrated, right? You're dehydrated. Well, if you're dehydrated, that's going to increase your blood osmolarity. As we discussed, if you increase your blood osmolarity, that's going to turn on the osmoreceptors. The osmoreceptors are now going to reduce your salivation, cause you to have a dry mouth, and give you a greater sense of thirst. As a result, you're going to ingest some water. That's going to cool your mouth. That's going to be that immediate effect. But you're also going to rehydrate your blood. That's the long-term effect. And also in that short term, you're going to distend the stomach and the intestines a little bit, and that's also part of the short-term story. So that's going on, but also simultaneously, you've also got dehydration leading to a reduction in blood pressure. Well, when the blood pressure is reduced, as we discussed last semester, just a little bit, renin will be released from the kidneys. Renin is a hormone released by the kidneys when the blood pressure goes low. Now, renin will have an effect on angiotensin II. Now, we'll come back to this hormone later in the course. But angiotensin II is also a potent stimulator of the osmoreceptors. And again, you'll reduce your salivation, get a dry mouth, increase your sense of thirst, which will cause you to drink, cool off your mouth, distend your stomach, and rehydrate. So all of those are the effects that you would see from dehydration, sort of two overlapping methods of assuring that you'll get thirsty and fix the problem. And this is that classic example of negative feedback. Now, the only way to significantly change our water levels in our body is through the urination, through the kidneys. It really is the only way to control significant amounts of output. The kidneys, however, cannot replace water or electrolytes. So we have to be getting our electrolytes and water in through our digestive system while regulating how much we lose through the urinary and other systems. And what you're going to see is that the major player here is sodium. So sodium is going to be an important electrolyte as we think about how the kidneys respond and how they are going to release water. So I've already mentioned ADH. How does ADH work? All I've said so far is that ADH caused you to be thirsty and that ADH caused you to drink more. But ADH does more than that. ADH, right? ADH, remind me, where was this made? That's right, ADH is made in the hypothalamus. It's released when the osmoreceptors sense dehydration. There's one fact in here that I don't have, though. Where does ADH get stored? ADH gets stored in the posterior pituitary until it is released. So I think of this as like being like bile, right? Bile is produced by the liver, but is stored largely in the gallbladder. Same idea. ADH is produced by the hypothalamus and stored in the posterior pituitary until it is released. Now what that is going to do is it's going to be released and go to the kidneys. And the kidneys are going to synthesize more aquaporins. Now aquaporins, let's break that down. Aqua, water. It ends in IN, so it's a protein. And pore. So it's a protein that creates more pores, more opportunities for water to be reabsorbed back into the body. And this is going to happen specifically at the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting ducts. You may recall that the water reabsorption in the nephron and in the kidney is under hormonal control at the distal end and in the collecting ducts, and ADH is a big part of that regulation. So when you're dehydrated, ADH sends a signal to the collecting ducts. The collecting ducts now make more aquaporins. Those aquaporins allow the kidney to reabsorb even more water. Even more water. And this is going to decrease the water volume and increase the osmolarity and, in a sense, concentrate the urine. Now, ADH is released when you're dehydrated, so what would inhibit the release of ADH? Right? ADH release will be inhibited when the opposite is true. So when the blood pressure is too high, or when the osmolarity of the blood is too low, then you will not release ADH. So the body is releasing ADH or not releasing ADH as part of this homeostatic mechanism. Now, if there is an abnormal amount of fluid in the body, if there's an abnormal volume or concentration or distribution, then you can either have fluid deficiencies or fluid excess, as would be seen in edema. So this is the same story, but looking a little bit more specifically at what ADH is doing in response to dehydration. So again, you're dehydrated. Now when you're dehydrated, you're going to have less water and more sodium, higher blood osmolarity. This is going to stimulate those osmoreceptors and release from the posterior pituitary the ADH. The ADH will travel through the blood, go to the kidneys, and stimulate the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting ducts to increase their aquaporins. Those aquaporins will now increase the water reabsorption. This will reduce the amount of output while increasing the sodium-water ratio. And as you're expecting, this is now a negative feedback that reduces the sodium. Also, though, remember that ADH causes you to be thirsty. And so you're going to ingest more water. And again, this is going to bring more water and again restore this balance. So once we restore this imbalance of water to sodium, then the ADH is no longer released. So what are some disorders? What can go wrong if you have wrong amounts of water or improper balance? Well, if there is what's called hypovolemia, break this down for me. So hypovolemia, emia, a condition of the blood where you have hypo, low volume. So low blood volume. And how would this occur? And in hypovolemia, you are losing as much water as you are solute, right? As much water as you are sodium. And as you're losing this volume, your osmolarity is remaining the same. Well, this would be what would happen in a hemorrhage. If you're bleeding out, you're losing volume and you're losing just as much sodium and solute with it. If you have severe burns, you're just losing fluid from all over those burns, or chronic vomiting or diarrhea. All of those situations, you are losing water and solute. Your body is not sensing a difference in its osmolarity. If it's not changing in its osmolarity, then ADH would not necessarily be triggered as violently. And the real problem here is you can go into circulatory shock. So you can lose so much blood volume that you're no longer getting blood to the brain. And you're basically going to cause neurological dysfunction. Infants are extremely sensitive to this if they have chronic diarrhea. This is a problem in the developing world. This is a problem with kids who get any sort of chronic diarrhea because they have less fluid in their body and because their kidneys are not as well developed in the first place and they can't regulate this as controlled. They really can have serious complications from chronic diarrhea. Now, what if you're simply dehydrated? That is, your body is simply not taking in enough water. Well, then your total body and your total body water would decline, your osmolarity would rise, and this is the story we've been talking about. Now, what would cause this would be, well, perhaps you're just not drinking enough, right? Lack of drinking water. Perhaps you have diabetes. One of the symptoms of diabetes is polyuria, that is excessive urination. Now, one of the reasons that a diabetic is urinating more is because they have glucose in their urine, and as we know, water follows solutes, or solutes suck, and so with more glucose, more water will be drawn into the urine. So diabetes could cause more dehydration. There is a condition called diabetes insipidus. This is diabetes. It's not has nothing to do with glucose, but instead there is a under or a hyposecretion of ADH. Well, with this